Hey guys, I am obviously not here. My son got very sick over the weekend. We had to take him to Children's Hospital on Saturday, and he's still not feeling so good, so I went ahead and put him for a substitute. So you should have filled out these already. I'm gonna go ahead and put the answers.
So go ahead and check your work. 3a squared plus 7a. Negative 2m to the third minus 12m squared plus 2m. And then finally, we get 4x to the fifth y minus 8x to the third y squared. Remember, when you put things in standard form, you go alphabetically first, and this is like saying x, 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 y, and this is x, 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 y, y. So the 5x's would come before the 3x's. So what is factoring? Today we're going to kind of talk about going backwards. So last week we really kind of expanded using multiplication, and so we took this and we made it into a bigger form. Today what we're going to do is put it back into a product. So rather than just being an addition expression, we're going to get things back into the product form where we're going to use multiplication. So obviously the inverse of multiplying is dividing, so we're going to use our greatest common factor, which tends to like divide things into groups. So what is factoring? It's the idea of separating a polynomial back into a product. So like I said, it's the idea, what is factoring? It's that idea of separating a polynomial back into a product form. So for example, in simplest form, something that looks kind of similar to this right here might be 4a squared plus 8a. And what's going to happen is we're going to put it back into its factored form, which is going to be 4a times a plus 2. So we're kind of going backwards. And polynomials that cannot be factored are called prime. So kind of going back to some of those skills that you learned in elementary school, and we are going to use a big one, this greatest common factor, to do so.
So there's several different approaches to finding factoring. Your approach that you choose is going to depend on your polynomial. So we're going to start with the easiest one, and that's by using the greatest common factor. Do not confuse your greatest common factor with least common multiple. So remember, factors are smaller numbers. So factors get smaller. And your least common multiple is going to get bigger. So multiples of 4 and 8 would be like 8, 16, 24, that kind of thing, where factors would just be numbers that make up both 4 and 8. So that would be 2 can go into both 4 and 8, and 4 can go into both 4 and 8. So we're going to use the following steps. Sorry, I just bumped my knee on the table. So we're going to use the following steps for factoring using our GCF. The first step we're going to do is we're going to identify the GCF of the polynomial. So we're going to look at each of the coefficients for a GCF, or which factor matches both of them. And then we're going to look at the variables second. So you'll notice up in this one, we had a variable that was in both of these as well. So we were able to pull one of those out. So second step is we're going to look for the variable. The variable must be present in all of the terms in order to also be considered a greatest common factor. If a variable is presented in all terms, you take the one with the smallest exponent. So, for example, here we had an 8a and a 4a squared. So we just took 1a because it was the smallest exponent. Then what we're going to do is we'll finally divide each term by that GCF with the variable that we found and leave the rest of everything else in the parentheses. And I'm going to write with variable. So with our variable. So there's 3 steps. We're going to look at our coefficient. We're going to look for our variables that are common. And then finally, we're going to divide each one into what we've got. So let's start down here. It says factor each polynomial. Check our work by distributing. If a polynomial cannot be factored, we're going to write prime. So let's look at this first problem here. And I actually went through it, but I made a little mistake, so I'm redoing it and plugging it into this video. If we take a look at this one here and we follow our instructions, where we're going to find our coefficient GCF first. If I look through, I have a 3 here and a 12 here. I know that 3 is made up of 1 and 3, and 12 is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. So my greatest common factor is this 3. So I'm going to divide the whole thing by 3. And I'm only going to divide it by 3 because I only have one x here and not an x here, and it needed to be in both terms in order to be a GCF. Because 3 is my greatest common factor, I'm going to put the 3 on the outside of my parentheses. That's always going to be right there. When I divide this out, 3 cancels, and I'm left with just x, plus 12 divided by 3 is 4. I can check my work by re-multiplying through the problem. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 4 is 12. It now matches my original problem, so I know that I factored it correctly. Hope that you kind of understand that. What happened here was this became 1x, this became 4. So that's how that ended up inside of my parentheses. Let's go ahead and try number 2. So I have a 7 and a 7, so my GCF is 7. I only have one variable, so I don't have a variable to turn. Then what happens is I'm going to divide both of these by 7. I'm left with 1y and negative 1. So the 7 goes on the outside, and then what I'm left with goes on the inside. You could also change this to just 7 times y minus 1. Okay, let's go to number 3. This time I have an 8 and a 36. So I know my factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. In 36, I know I have 1 and 36, 2, and my brain hurts, 15, 16, 17, 18. I have 4 and 9, and I don't have an 8. So my GCF is 4. So I'm going to divide both of these by 4 and put my 4 on the outside. So the GCF comes onto the outside. 8 divided by 4 is 2m. 36 divided by 4 is 9. So I'm going to have plus 9n. Okay, let's try this one real quick. I have a 5 and a 30. I know that my GCF equals 5. My variables are different, so I don't have any variables yet. I'm going to divide both by 5. So 5 is going to go on the outside. I'm left with x, because 5 divided by 5 is 1, plus 6y. Hopefully this is making sense. Try and flip it over.
Let's start with finding our GCF. I have 15 and 30, so my GCF is 15. When I look at my variables, I have both in common the a and the b. The first number, or the first term, is 15a squared b. The second is negative 30ab. So there's one a and one b in both of these. So we're going to have 15ab on the outside. When I divide by 15ab, what I'm left with is a single a, and what I'm left with is just negative 2. If I think about this, 15ab times a would be 15a squared b, which is what we have here, and 30ab, which is what we have here. With this one, the only thing that changes is we no longer have coefficients. So our GCF is just a. When I divide this by a, these cancel out and I'm left with b. These cancel out and I'm left with minus 1. We're back to single coefficients and single variables with number 13. However, when I look at 5 and 13 and I try to list their factors, I find no common factors. The factors of 5 are 1 and 5. The factors of 1 and 13 are 1 and 13 are 1 and 13. The only common GCF or common factor they have is 1. So this is an answer where our answer is prime. There's nothing I can do with this problem. It is also the only one of your practice problems that is prime on this sheet. Okay, We're gonna go ahead and skip down to number 17. As I look through and try to find my GCF, I have a 6, a 14, and a 10. Based off of the two smallest ones, I know that my GCF is 2. And then when I look in further, I notice that 2 is also divisible, or 14 is also divisible by 2. So my GCF is 2. And then I'm gonna go look at my variables. I have 4y's, 3y's, and 2y's. So I'm gonna take 2y because it's the smallest exponent. So our GCF is 2y squared. When I divide this by 2y squared, this is going to cancel out. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then I get rid of 2 the same way that we did using our exponent rules, where we end up with just y squared. Because I'm getting rid of 2 y squares, so I have the y to the 4th, and I subtract them. 14 divided by 2 is a positive 7. This time 3 minus 2 is just y. And then finally the negative 10y squared divided by 2y squared. The y squares cancel out, so I'm just left with negative 10 divided by 2. So negative 10 divided by 2 is just negative 5. I can check by factoring or by multiplying it back out. 2 times 3 is 6. Y squared times y squared is y to the 4th. 2 times 7 is 14. Y squared times y is y to the 3rd. 2 times 5, or negative 5, is negative 10. Y squared times 1 is y squared. We'll go ahead and skip 19. Let's go ahead and look at number 21. It's kind of scary because you have a coefficient over here. You've got all sorts of different variables. So let's go ahead and start looking through it. Because we only have one coefficient, we do not have a GCF of anything larger than 1. So we don't write that out. We're just going to leave it as nothing. But when I look at my variables, I have 3 m's and 1 n here. I have 2 m's and 2 n's, so they have a common m and an n, but my common m is to a 2, my common n is to a 1. On this one, I have a common m, single m, but a common 3 raised to the 3rd. So now my smallest m is 1m, my smallest n is 1n. So our GCF happens to be the abbreviation for our lovely state of mn. That's going to come on the outside. Then what goes on the inside is just what cancels. So remember, this is the same thing as like saying this. So 3 minus 1 is 2. And the n minus the n is nothing. So we're going to just leave that with m squared. Then we have 2 minus 1 is m, but this is a negative, so we're going to have minus m. 2 minus 1 is 1, so we have mn. Now with this coefficient, this is like saying I have a 0 coefficient. So 5 minus 0 is nothing, or is 5. M minus 1 is nothing. N to the 3rd minus 1n is n to the 2nd.
Let's go ahead and look for our greatest common factor. So I have a 35, which I know has common factors of 5 and 7. 20 has a common factor of 5. And 15 also has a common factor of 5. So I know that my greatest common factor is 5. And then I'm going to look, I have 2 A's, 1 A, 1 A. So I'm going to pull out 1 A. 5A is my GCF, so it comes on the outside. I'm going to divide everything by 5A. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 2 A's, or A squared, minus 1A is just going to be A. Negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. These A's cancel out. I'm left with 4B squared. And then finally 15A divided by 5A is a fun little 3 to cap it off.
So your homework here, I'm not worried. Just pick a column and go on down. A little hint, none of them are prime. Good luck. Email me if you have any questions, guys. I miss you, and I'll see you tomorrow.